Hi, it's Kate here. I'm in the potting shed today because in this episode I get to talk to flower grower, photographer, writer, and consultant clinical psychologist Grace Alexander. I've been following Grace for a while, and she has this beautiful way of drawing us into her idyllic world of thatched cottages, of stolen moments of beauty, of sunbeams illuminating corners in dusty tones of chestnut and coral and linen and artisan made objects. And this is through her Gather with Grace Alexander community, the seeds that she sells, and her gorgeous newsletter, and her new book, which is called Grow and Gather. So I thought she'd be kind of floaty and fey, and I was completely wrong. She's grounded in social justice and in a sense of who she is and what she's here to do. And this is what we talked about. It's a deep conversation about how childhood experience builds us into the people that we are today. We talk about slowing down our lives, about how to be present, her writing process, her day job as a psychologist, how she fits it all in and avoids burnout, and the overriding warmth and how healing that is, and the difficulty of nurturing ourselves in this culture of toxic productivity, plus, of course, her excellent top tip for a wonderful life. I find that gardening is both deeply, deeply healing and wonderful and therapeutic, and also it drives me mad.
Yeah.
It drives me crackers. So,
Yeah.
because you are very, well, from the way that you present your gardening life, it looks flipping gorgeous. I'm very curious about your experience of that.
I think my experience of that is that gardening is a little bit like housework, and in a lot of ways like life in general, which is if you accept that the universe is trying to move you continuously towards chaos, and your job as a human being is to try and stop it going towards chaos and imposing some order on it. It's sort of all the ideas around entropy and things like that. But it is a sort of never-ending Sisyphean task, which is finding that beautiful spot between, I have gardened this space so much that it looks like its best natural beautiful self, and it's not that imposed, stiff, manicured, roundup, mown, all of that sort of where humanity has just sucked the soul out of a piece of ground. But although I'm quite a chaotic sort of person, I'm not very good at the idea that I'm not in control. That's not quite the right way of saying it. I live life at quite a fast pace, and I find the fact that I can blink, and my asparagus bed was immaculate 3 weeks ago. Immaculate. I've literally blinked. I've gone and worked on a different area of the garden, and it's now just full of bindweed again. It's got thistles in it. The worst thing is it's also got beautiful things in it. I know that some of it is Nigella and some of it is Orlea. And so I can't just dig it all out. I've got to very carefully go through everything, which when I have a to-do list of a gazillion other things, I find quite difficult. So, and I have written about this before, and I have talked about this, that I struggle with this idea that gardening as an activity is inherently therapeutic, because I think there's too much, it brings up too much human weakness, and it brings up your edges, and it brings up, if you have any issues around control or any issues around all of that, you will find those things in trying to garden. Saying that, I find beauty incredibly healing.
So you have the most, for people who haven't encountered you, you have the most extraordinary delicate aesthetic that's somewhere between sort of bruise and bag, and it's moody and sexy and to die for. So it's clear that you're...
That's absolutely everything I was aiming for. So that's amazing. That's amazing. I know I do occasionally threaten that I'm just going to dig everything up and I'm only going to grow brown flowers. I have red hair, and, you know, everything has to be no black, no white, no shiny. My Cocker Spaniel is the exception, but I didn't choose him. He chose me. So everything is sort of those muted, dusty, autumnal tones. Even in spring, we're recording this at the beginning of, what's summer now, the beginning of June, and all of my irises are out and they're all dark red, brown. There's the odd sort of gold corally orange, but yeah, I do have a very, very specific aesthetic.
And the beauty of engaging mindfully with beauty of any kind, whether it's, you know, a pot or a flower or a painting, is just it brings us into the present, doesn't it? I mean, it's deeply healing in that we are forced to come into the now and exclude our craziness, our crazy thoughts.
Yes, and I do find that I have to do that at one remove. So when I am actively working my field, I'm very often berating myself for the past. So I really wish I'd, you know, weeded this when it wasn't quite so overgrown. Or I'm constantly in the future, what shall I put here? What's this going to look like next year? Or next year I'm going to make sure I get that in a bit earlier. I'm sort of moving through time a lot with that. But the way I find that I can really drop into that very present moment is when I'm capturing that beauty. So photography has been a huge thing for me. For probably the first 5 years, I was very much in that, I know what I like, but I don't know how to find that, a way of doing that. And then I slowly started to be able to do it. And those moments of capturing something, those are my moments of here, now. Nothing else is, I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm not regretting, planning, dreaming, hoping. Nothing exists except my relationship with this object, that I'm trying to just find the right light to just capture this thing. And it's so unexpected when that happens. It's a bit like a flow state. You can't plan it and you can't see it coming, and you can't. It's like at the weekend I cut lots of peonies, and I was photographing these peonies, and it was all lovely and it was wonderful, and, you know, who doesn't like peonies? And then I found a tiny white Aquilegia under a bay tree. It was only because I was, you know, trimming some hedges and things in the kitchen garden, and just sort of, there it was. And I cut it and I brought it inside, and that was just, it was so perfect and so exquisite, and the light, and that, in a way, it's such a visual representation for me. My photography is very often one thing on a blank background. I rarely do sort of landscapes. I do a bit, but, you know, it's only because Instagram says I'm boring otherwise. But the one that probably people would recognize as mine would be that single flower on it's my lime wall in my sitting room, with side light of just that. And I think maybe I need that to really appreciate beauty. Maybe there's too much beauty in a garden. Maybe there's too much.
Well, I've been exploring, because like you, when I'm gardening, you know, I have. You said earlier, before I pressed record, that we garden like we do everything else. You know,
Yeah.
which I think is really, really astute, because in my head there's always the, oh God, well, this isn't very good. And
Yeah.
pink, I hate this pink. What is it doing here? But I'm too attached to plants. You know, I have a whole load of crazy stuff going on in my head.
Yeah.
So I've tried to bring in moments of mindfulness into my time outside, when I'm working in the garden and when I'm sort of, I don't know, doodling around, standing on the grass in bare feet, which is what I was just doing before this call. And what I've discovered is that I have to concentrate on one sense at a time. I have to narrow down the bandwidth. So I either have to listen with my eyes shut, or I have to feel, or I have to open my energy to something. But to do more than one sense at a time, I just get overwhelmed. So it's about, I think I see that in what you had, the way you're describing your photographic process, to kind of edit everything down so that we can then see.
Yeah, that's such an interesting thing to say, and it's just triggered off all sorts of thoughts about what my first thought was. There are roses out at the moment, and I can smell roses wherever I go because I've got them dotted, or didn't have enough space in any one place, so I've got them sort of in lots and lots of different places, and I don't know which rose it is that's smelling, and I keep thinking I must take the time to go around and just stand by each one and try and work out. I think it's Constance Spry, but I'm not sure. And I haven't done it yet. And that's so interesting. That I think that's such a fascinating way of interacting and just being with.
Yeah.
But maybe there's just so much.
Being with a lover, you know, if you're with someone or a friend or something, and you open your heart to the person and you kind of drink them in. You know, if you think about that kind of in love flow state, and you're
yeah,
and then you're absolutely focused on the beloved, and there's nothing else.
Yeah.
And if well, I'm not managing it very often, I have to say, but what I would aspire to is to have that degree of openness to the task, or to the plant, or to the sense.
I mean, I definitely personify my field. We're definitely a team. I definitely think of her as is it too weird to say a colleague? Like, it feels like me and her, we run our business together. It's yeah. And maybe I don't drink her in that way. It's a bit more, right, guys, what are we gonna do today? Right, excellent, come on then. And
Job.
Yeah, a little bit like that. And I did say to someone the other day, they said, oh, you know, I'd love to start, you know, do something like you were doing, and I love gardening. I said, that's great, don't make it a business. changes everything. But not in a catastrophic way. It's a different relationship. She's not my lover. She's not, you know, we don't gaze into each other's eyes, and, you know, I don't frolic around in linen looking like, you know, I'm in there in boots and we work together.
Now you're messing with my head.
I know. But I do quite actively avoid the linen dress and the trug aesthetic, because I think I can't keep that real. I can't. Yeah.
So I'd love to hear more about your book. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
But can we can't get our sticky fingers on it yet, but can we order it?
Yes, you can pre-order it. So interestingly, I mean, the book came out of a very similar experience to the photography, although I think probably writing came long before photography, and is probably my natural means of expression. I have a day job as well where I write a lot, and writing has always been something that has been part of, not in a sort of I sit down and write journals or novels, but I write in a quite a functional, technical sort of way. And writing became a way of me trying to capture exactly what we were just talking about, those mindful present moments of you put a seed in a pot and you think, I'll remember what that is, I'll never forget what that is, I don't need to label that, I absolutely remember that's those very special black climbing beans that someone's given me. And then you come back 2 weeks later and you have no idea what, because we think things are so emotionally important in the moment, and then the brain moves on and you think, oh God, wish I'd written that down. And I found a gardener's diary from sort of Victorian era, when big houses had, you know, huge walled gardens, and there was just a jobbing gardener just wrote every day for 40 years, wrote what the weather was like, what he'd done, just a sentence, not a jobs list, just a sentence. And I was just like, that feels so powerful. And so I started to do that for the garden and for the flower field. And I have dogs, and when I walk my dogs every day, most days we will see something new. So the dog roses have just started coming out, or when the wild garlic comes, or they put up a deer, and you know, and I wanted to record those things as well, because I'm one of those people that just lives in my head the whole time, and I live just too much not in the moment. So I started writing a daily gardener's journal, which became my Sunday night newsletter. Feel free to sign up. We've just had 100th, believe it or not, 100th episode of Sunday night newsletter.
They are glorious. They're absolutely glorious. We get to, it's, I was saying earlier, it feels like you're embracing us into this kind of very real but very idealized, beautiful, linen flavored, coloured life.
I'm wearing linen shirts. Your listeners won't be able to see me, but I'm wearing linen shirt. It's just not a frock. I'm just not a very frock sort of person.
Very frocky.
Not very frocky. And yeah, so that's how I sort of try to tip it, exactly what you were saying earlier about maybe just reducing to one sense or one medium. Then I added photography, obviously, and that has also become part of the newsletters. So about 18 months ago, I was approached by quite a few publishers. We had a bit of a bidding war, actually, when it all started. I know, it was mad. It turns out all sorts of people signed up to my newsletter. I've just found out that an editor from Germany has been subscribing to it forever and has bought the rights to my book, which I was like, oh, who knew? I mean, I don't know what.
That is so cool.
I know, like, I have to email my publisher and say, is this like, she sends me emails like, oh my God, this most amazing thing has happened. I'm like, I have no frame of reference for this. Is this good? Is Germany good? Germany's amazing. They never buy books in advance. It's like, oh, okay. So I wrote a book, and it was photographed by Dean Hearn, who is half of The Future Kept, who also has a lovely aesthetic, which is very me. So that worked really well. And we're going through all those sort of last, you know, finalizing commas, and do you like this color, and what about that color, and this is the front cover, and it's out on the 16th of September, which is coincidentally Chelsea week, so hopefully everybody will be wanting to be thinking about gardening. And it's called Grow and Gather by Grace Alexander.
Oh
yeah.
And I mean, how excited do you feel? Scale 1 to 10? Like 10 vibrating, 0 meh. How cool is that?
It is very cool. It is very cool. I don't know if I'm defending myself against disappointment and the sort of the exposure and the vulnerability that comes with the process, but I'm just not sure how I feel about it, really. And lots of people have said this to me, is when they've published through traditional publishers. I think it is a bit different if you self-publish, that there's so many other people involved in it. There's a bit of an element of, you know, I love writing my newsletter because it's just me, and there's always a typo in it somewhere, always. It's like the rugs that have to have an imperfection to show that they're not perfect. All of my typos all of my newsletters have a typo in. Yeah, so there is something very different about this experience. I'm used to that very personal, very connected. It is, when I write, it's literally you, the reader, and me. That's it. so it is a very different thing
A bit
to,
like the baby being brought up by the nanny.
yeah.
You know,
Yes. Yeah, it is a bit
kind of,
like that.
you pushed it out, and then it's kind of taken care of elsewhere.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, yeah,
Writing by yourself has this directness because you're writing directly to them. You press the send button, and then
yeah, yeah.
it's much more immediate.
Yeah, and it's very much in real time. And every so often, someone says, "Oh, you should have some proofread your newsletter." So nobody works at 7:30 on a Sunday night, and I write it, and it goes at 8 o'clock on a Sunday night. I'll have just finished putting it together when I press send, and that's also sort of how I work as well. That's just, having said that, I'm very often sort of moving around in time. I'm also quite immediate. I think that's part of the realness as well, and my authenticity is nothing's contrived. I don't overthink things. I really don't. Maybe I should. No.
Life is good.
I was just being polite when I said that, really. I know I'm not going to overthink things. As a psychologist, I know exactly how much to think about things.
Yes, because that's also why I wanted to, really was so excited to talk to you, because you bring the gardening and this psychologist head together. So how do they, well, how do you manage to squeeze it all in, actually, is really what I want to know. You've got a lot going on. You've got the book, you've got Gather, which is your gorgeous community, which
I love Gather.
Also sign up and join in with, and with all sorts of wonderful practical stuff and beautiful stuff. And I think I've, somewhere you said something about gathering around a fire and having a little chat and
yeah it was always tea
and your day job and a field and a garden and 3 dogs and everything else in your life. So how the hell does that work, to do all that?
I mean, there's a couple of different answers to that in terms of, probably there's a couple of different levels. I think the first thing to say is I don't have children, and that makes my life a gazillion times easier. It means I get to do what I want, how I want, when I want, and I don't have to compromise in terms of how I spend my time. I am a child protection psychologist, which means things happen unexpectedly, often in crisis, and often it's all a bit mad when things kick off. But I am the clinical director of a residential assessment service. So my job is, I run a team of people, and I run a service where parents and children, often tiny children, very little children, come and live with us for up to 3 months, and we assess them living with us. So actually my day job has no boundaries, because people are with us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, Christmas, their birthdays, everything. There is no time off at all, and data is being produced all of the time. But it means that very early on in my job, there was never a traditional, why weren't you in at 9 o'clock? Or 10 to 5, time to go home. It's just, you do the job and you make sure everyone's safe, and you make sure that the right assessments are done, and you make sure that when everything goes to court, the right decisions are made for the children. Doesn't matter how you do it, doesn't matter when you do it, doesn't matter if it's 2 o'clock in the morning. And a lot of that job is me supporting safeguarding incidents, or it's supporting my team, or it's writing. And so very often I would write at night, because when you're writing something like that, I'll own that. When I'm writing something like that, I need a deadline, caffeine and sugar. So I get to about sort of 9 o'clock at night, have a bit of a panic attack, like bucket of tea, packet of biscuits, and write until 2 o'clock in the morning. And there would be this beautiful report at the end of it. Probably with a typo in, to be fair, but anyway, that's life. But it meant that my hours were just all over the place. So it meant that if I needed to come home and pack an order at 10 o'clock, or, I needed to get my tulips in at a certain time, that's what I did. As long as I was doing my job, as long as I was working my hours, didn't matter when I was doing them. And so I just fitted everything in.
You must have the most phenomenal constitution and extraordinary internal boundaries to do that. Where are your edges? I mean, for me, I'm quite permeable.
Mm.
I need routine. I'm like a Labrador. I need routine. I need this thing and that thing. Otherwise, I'm like,
no, I'm like,
you
know those Excel spreadsheets that you've got like tabs at the bottom?
Yeah.
I can tab constantly between different things.
Wow.
So yeah, so we have members of our team at work. We have members of our team who can and can't. So I can do that thing where someone says, God, they're a bit like, and I'll go, that person. Yeah. I have a brain that I can set shift incredibly quickly and very accurately and just go back to what I was doing and then do something else and go back to what I was doing, do something else. It's probably got harder as I've got older.
Can I ask how old you are?
Oh, I'm 40.
Okay, so you're 40. Not in perimenopause yet.
Well, I don't know. It's very hot today. I genuinely.
You can tell.
I was drinking a cup of coffee the other day, and I was thinking, it's 30 degrees. I'm drinking hot coffee, and I've got a vest on. Is this the menopause, or am I just hot? I'm definitely in that time of life where when things happen, I go, "Oh, is this it? Is this?" But no.
But if you're tabbing through Excel sheets in your head,
yeah, probably not. Yeah,
it's fantastic.
Oh, yeah,
I have such envy of that skill.
Well, but like you say, I mean, it means that I have a certain type of boundaries, but it means that I don't really switch off. I find it very difficult. I mean, that is partly just by virtue, if I'm perfectly honest with you, is although I'm not technically full-time at work anymore, because of the nature of the work, I'm always on call, I'm always doing things, I'm always, if anything happens, ring me, I'm there. And the business has gone mad. I mean, it's huge. It's a proper full-time business. I'm such a control freak. I can't outsource anything, but probably I should have somebody packing my seeds for me. I should probably have somebody doing my social media for me and somebody answering my emails for me. It's never going to happen. So I do everything all the time. So yes, there is very much, a shadow side to that. So don't envy it too much. Yeah. Don't sit down much. Or if I do, I'm writing or emailing. Or yeah.
Can we circle back round to where we started about gardening and being therapeutic or not? Because I it's stuck in my mind what you said, and I think that the fact that we meet our edges so often in gardening, the internal criticism about that stupid pink poppy, which I know is going to flower really soon. It's like, oh, the poppy's going to flower. Oh, the poppy's going to flower.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's wanting to bring us into awareness.
Yeah.
And I do think that is therapeutic. Yes, it hurts, but there's a movement for us. There's a movement that brings us more towards where we need to pay attention. Whether it's loss, picking slugs have munched up a whole row of seedlings, or it forces us to deal with stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the similarity between my job and my growing is probably, I've never really articulated this out loud, I've thought about it a few times, is probably the nurture of others at the expense of myself. You don't work in child protection unless you're willing to put up with some fairly grim stuff. And I always say I will do that because for whatever reason, I was given the gift of being good at what I do. And it's very hard to say, I'm going to walk away from that and I'm going to let the children just fend for themselves, or somebody else can do it, even though I probably won't do it as well as me. And I think one of the things that I find so hard with gardening is, in order to garden, and just going back to the idea of continuum, there's sort of wilderness and not necessarily wilding, because I think, you know, if I let my field just rewild, I would just have a lot of nettles very quickly. It wouldn't be a balanced ecosystem, it would just be a lot of nettles. And that, you know, really rigidly controlled, manicured discipline. Like you, if I've got a flower that I think, oh, I didn't really want it in that colour, there's absolutely no way I'm going to be able to dig it up or throw it away. I'm going to nurture it even though I didn't really want it. I'm going to, you know, if there's self-sewn foxgloves in a bit that I was going to put the, you know, put the kale in, I just have to put the kale around the foxglove. Like I can't, yeah. So there is something about nurture is prioritized over everything, even if that's not necessarily what I want or what's good for me in terms of the person that's controlling this. But somehow that trumps everything.
There's something in what you're saying about allowing things to find their natural growth pattern, you know.
Yeah.
If you can give a family enough space and sort out the messy bits, then everybody can grow. And it's the same when you have, you know, foxgloves and kale.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you avoid burning out? Because in child protection, people don't last that long.
No. How do I avoid burning out? There's a question that's asked on the assumption that I haven't, which I haven't. Occasionally I get emails from people saying, I'm really worried about you. You sound like you're really stressed. I think you're burning out. I'm like, I'm not. Probably because there is such a fit between what I do and my innate character and constitution, how much that job taps into my strengths and how much my job taps into my values, and how much I'm valued by my team, I would probably say. Which now I'm not burnt out and I'm not burning out, but I can see the impact on me of what I do in terms of how much I have to numb my own feelings, not in a, you know, catastrophic way, but, you know, what Brené Brown says, you can't selectively numb. And when I had a terrible day yesterday where a barrister just shouted at me for hours. You know, I'd done exactly the right assessment, I'd come to exactly the right conclusions, and everything was right for the children. You know, it was absolutely. But part of the process is she gets, you know, as much airtime as she likes to just shout at me. And they could hear it in the next room. I was on Teams in my office and she was just shouting at me. And that I find infinitely harder to manage than any of the trauma that I see in the families. That, because my job is to help people. And when you are being attacked, I'm not good at I stand my ground, trust me, I will absolutely stand my ground. But it's that I find harder to keep bouncing back from every time, you know, than the sadness of the work and the hardness of the families themselves. But that's the process that we have, that, you know, every family has the right to challenge someone like me who's saying, do you know what, it's not okay, it's not safe. And I do believe that I go through that so the children are safe, and that's, you know, I'm a grown up and I can take it. So did that answer the question about how do I not burn out? Everyone thinks it's I come home to my garden and I stand in my garden feeling all relaxed. No, I've absolutely burnt that myth, haven't I?
What I heard you say was that the skills that your job requires are a really good fit. That you feel appreciated by your team, so you feel valued by the people around you, and something else that I've now forgotten.
My values. There's a good fit
Yes.
between my values. So
you have a
know,
really strong sense of social justice, don't you?
I do. I mean, it's interesting because also a couple of things you've commented on are warmth. When you talk about me being quite warm, and for me, the thing that I, spend a lot of my time, my day job, thinking about and talking about and trying to explain to parents who might have had horrific histories themselves is the importance of warmth in caring for children, and that sort of how you just express love and you create a sense of safety in children, and you do that through warmth. And I'm quite unusual.
Tell me more about that. Tell me more about warmth.
Warmth.
I mean,
it means a sensitivity to others, to otherness. It means a softness, even when you are being, I'm not in any way a wafty sort of person. I'm, and quite often people will describe me as quite scary. But there is a softness and there is a gentleness. And because I am around children a lot, I think that's really important to them, that they experience me as warm. So it sort of becomes quite generalized, I think. I think part of it is also because our society can't cope with women who are not warm. I think if I turn my warmth off,
you would be judged as being a bitch, being ambitious, being ruthless, all the negativity.
See, look, we all soften it with a bit of a laugh and but it's fine. But I have a combination of strength and warmth. Like, nobody messes with me. You do not, professionally, Barrett's going to shout at me for 2 hours. You're going to get absolutely fucking nowhere. Because I'm incredibly grounded and incredibly rooted in my sense of self. But from that position, it means that I can accommodate a really wide range of other people's sort of positions. So children who have been very frightened or very traumatized, they recognize, and parents probably even more than the children, they recognize a sense of containment. And actually I think it's containment as much as it is warmth.
So I would call that, I would put that along the lines of safety. It's creating a safe containment, is what the jargon in my world.
But it's interesting when people reflect back to me what I do with Gather, or what I do with my newsletter, or what I even do with just my Instagram, is there's a sort of very connection, a connected sort of a grounding. There's a sense of not relief, that's not quite the right word, but something about that safety of I can say I've had a bad day, but you all know I'm going to be all right. You can connect to it in a sort of, this isn't someone who's having a meltdown. It's just okay to articulate that it's been a bad day, or it's just, there is something, I hope, very calming and very grounding. I love the word grounding. Doesn't that say so much about ground?
That opens up other things I wanted to just because of my big sticky beak, sticking my big sticky beak in. How did you come by this sense of self? Did you inherit that from your parents? This sense of self, this sort of grounding in yourself. Was that from your upbringing?
My upbringing was very much around, I'm valued for what I do, not who I am. I don't necessarily, so my dad says, with some sense of bafflement, as if he's got nothing to do with this. When you were little, you just didn't want to be cuddled. I can't think why. So actually, I grew up in a house with quite a lot of anger. And my parents had a horrendous divorce when I was around 14, 15. And so I project a huge amount of my own lack of nurture onto children. So I give them, and I make sure they have the life that they deserve. They have the nurture that they deserve. They have the warmth that they deserve, because I didn't have that. And so I think the warmth comes from knowing what it feels like to not have warmth. It comes from, I'm a compulsive caregiver. I find my value in, I prove my worth in being of value to others emotionally, which is the child of a postnatally depressed mother. And I don't ever want anyone to feel bad, which is ridiculous given that what I tell people at the end of my assessments, but in the moment, I never want people to feel bad. So it's a sort of complex constellation of small t trauma and attachment stuff, which I think I probably won't fully unpick until I don't do the job that I do anymore. I think whilst it's too egocentric, it works too well for me to have these sort of features in my psyche, and for them to express them in the ways that I do. And I'm hugely reinforced for having them as well. You know, I'm hugely valued in, you know, what I do. I'm very senior in my role. And I think there might be one day where I say, oh, we're going to turn this inwards anytime soon. We're going to start nurturing ourselves at all. How do we feel about that? It's probably about another 2.5 years away yet. I know I don't do it. And I sort of can imagine thinking about doing it, but I can't actually think about what it would really truly look like to turn what I give to others back onto myself.
I think that would be a very exciting adventure.
Yeah, people do. I just think it's petrifying.
Adventure.
Oh God.
I say adventure. Yeah. Because
then I'll get people say, "What do you do all day? What do you mean you've jacked in your job? You know, what do you do?" Like, and then it sort of reactivates all my sort of, you know. But yeah, I can see it, and it's certainly in my future, and I am exploring those internally, and I am, you know, but the resistance comes when you move away from it. When you're in it and you're doing it, it feels so flow state that actually you don't have to challenge anything. But so I am now 3 days a week at work, which I never thought would ever happen, ever. And from the end of July, I will be technically 2 days, and then we'll see what moves in to fill that space. I mean, my fear, not my fear, maybe my fear is that I will create a life, a sort of self-employed job, business, entrepreneurship sort of thing, which just replicates everything I ever did in my job. And I'm just my own boss then. I'm, you know, and I get to, you know, not give myself lunch breaks, you know, to myself, rather than, you know, blaming it on someone else.
You have to blame the boss. Oh, that's me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm really mindful and aware of those things, and I'm not I'm very carefully not rushing or pushing too hard in either direction. I'm just sort of letting it sit there for a bit and just being curious about what will come up for me. I mean, it doesn't help that my husband has recently retrained as a doctor, and so his work tempo is quite strong. So it's quite hard to, I find it really hard to allow myself that very calm nurturing when he sort of falls in the door after a day, you know, in the hospital, on the acute medical wards, you know, and I'm a bit like, oh, I was trying to just create some space for rest, and I feel quite tired. And he's like, you're tired. And I'm like, oh, right, okay.
Oh, the time competition.
So it's
yeah. Okay.
But he's made his choices, and I entirely support everything he does. But it is just, I think we sort of referenced society earlier about what society holds us to, but there are closer things as well. There are sort of inner systems as well that we take on, and toxic productivity. And I have an internalized capitalist who is really resistant to shifting, like really tricky. Which I notice more now. I think there's been so much more awareness of that, and I hear it more now, and I notice it more now.
Such rich experience that you're sharing with us. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Grace, it's just delicious. I have so many thoughts and so many questions, but we need to kind of bring our conversation towards the end now. And can you give us a tippiest top tip for a beautiful inside life? And everybody hates this. They're like, you're so reductive.
No, I loved it. Loved it.
Oh, you do? Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I loved it.
Hit me. Come on, hit me, Grace.
Well, I mean, going back to that idea of, my pictures are a single Aquilegia and lots of negative space. Actually, it really brought up that for me, which is, just switch off all the noise and all the, and what I would say is access your observing self often.
Can you say what that is, please?
So the observing self is the you that, it's not the you that is thinking or speaking or do it. It's the you that is watching you thinking and speaking and doing. So if you ever practice any mindfulness or any meditation, you're accessing your observing self. There's no criticism, no judgment. It just means you step out of the immediate experience and take a step back and observe. And I think that's hugely valuable with all things that we've been talking about, being, pulled into acting in certain ways, pulled into behaving in certain ways, pulled into reacting and engaging with our gardening in certain ways, just to take a step back and say, oh, I notice I'm doing that thing again. I notice I'm saying that thing to myself again. I notice this poppy. I notice this rose. I notice me noticing this rose. Just creating a sense of expansiveness around the moment's experience whilst being in the moment.
And how do we remember? How do we remember they're there? Our thoughts are so overwhelmingly consuming. It's so noisy in here.
Yeah, it is.
It's crowded.
Yeah.
It's like a rush hour tube train.
Yeah. Know that you will forget to do it, and then you will remember.
Okay.
And never beat yourself up for that, or think that, that's not how everybody experiences it. But the more often you remember, the more often you will remember. It's a habit. It's when I do mindfulness practice regularly, it comes up in all other areas of my life. When I forget to do it, I forget it all.
It's all a practice, isn't it?
It's all a practice.
Whether you're weeding your asparagus or writing your report. Thank you so much, Grace. It has been such a deep pleasure.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Full of earthy goodness, eh? Well, before I leave the perlite and the compost and the trowels in the shed, there's just time to remind you that Grace's new book, which is called Grow and Gather, A Gardener's Guide to a Year of Cut Flowers, is available from Waterstones to order. And I recommend you sign up to her newsletter too. I just love it. It's so heartwarming. It comes every Sunday. And it's like gathering around the hearth for a cup of tea and a chat. It's an absolute treat. And you can find all this stuff over at her website, which is Grace Alexander Flowers, I'd love to hear your responses to our conversation. So do pop over to Instagram, where you can find me at Kate_Codrington, and you can join the conversation and take a peek at my garden as well, although goodness knows it's nowhere near as gorgeous as Grace's. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would be great if you could share it with a friend who might like it, or maybe even leave a review. That I would be so grateful if you could do that. And don't forget to join me very soon for another exciting adventure into the inside world.